It's safe to say the 1950s were a time of great prosperity in the United States. It was also a time of great paranoia and mistrust. That filtered into our pop culture, especially in the genre of science fiction films. Most of these films were shot on shoestring budgets by third-rate studios who were more concerned with making a quick buck than they were with telling a compelling and interesting tale. 64 years later, frankly, not much has changed. In fact, now instead of coming up with new ideas, studios are taking what few decent classic films there were and taking a huge steaming dump on them. It's like Hollywood is now controlled by a bunch of vindictive ex-wives with healthy bowels. Here's your damn rant show, folks. Greetings and welcome to Film Rants, doing for the film industry what a shot of Everclear would do to a glass of eggnog. I'm your host, E. Adam Thomas, and tonight we're looking at two versions of the Harry Bates short story Farewell to the Master, originally published in the pulp magazine Astounding Science Fiction. The 1951 film The Day the Earth Stood Still starred Michael Rennie, Patricia Neal, and Sam Jaffe, the latter of which was almost pulled from the film thanks to anti-communist blacklisting so prevalent in Hollywood at the time. Directed by Robert Wise, who would later go on to direct the first Star Trek film in 1979, the film tells the tale of an alien who comes to Earth with a dire warning for all mankind. The alien, named Klatu, wants to meet with all of the world's leaders, mainly to warn them of the consequences of bringing Earth's violent and warlike tendencies out into space. He, of course, has a defensive robot called Gort with him to help him keep the peace, but that doesn't stop some dickhead soldier from taking a shot at him. Throughout the film, Klatu does his due diligence to try to save the human race from itself, with his one main show of force being that for half an hour, he neutralizes all electrical energy on the planet. This only serves to make us more belligerent near the end, though, and Klatu is seemingly killed by soldiers. Gort is about ready to go apeshit and wipe everything out, but then Helen Benson, the only person apparently smart enough to know that shooting first and asking questions later is a really stupid thing to do when dealing with extraterrestrials, manages to deliver the now famous line, Klatu Varada Nikto, essentially telling Gort to chill his shit out and go help Klatu. Ultimately, Klatu is brought back to life, and he is able to deliver his message to mankind, which is basically, stay the fuck off our land if you can't play nice. Fast forward to 2008. Same premise, same characters, hell, at times, almost the same goddamn script. This time, Klatu is played by that destroyer of good cinema, Keanu Reeves. Reeves plays Klatu like some kind of well-dressed, scrawny cross between the Terminator and Mr. Spock. By stark contrast, there's a hopeful benevolence and friendliness in Michael Rennie's performance that is critical to the final resolution of the plot. The original film carried with it a message of hope and a desire for mankind to learn from its mistakes. This film carries a message that anytime you try to remake a classic film, it is apparently required to turn it into something dark, mean-spirited, and insulting. John Cleese turns in a wonderful performance as Professor Barnhart, which was played in the original film by Sam Jaffe. But the role is so much more underused in the new version of the film, it's almost as though they just spliced him in there because they liked the chalkboard scene. One high point of the newer film is the robot Gort, which looks incredible and conveys the sense of ominous power necessary. The one downfall of the original film is that Gort looks more like a tall guy in a robot suit, and although it was a unique costume for its day, once the robot starts moving, you can kind of tell it's just a 7-foot-tall stunt actor with a bad back. Gort was played in the original film by Locke Martin, who was a doorman for Grauman's Chinese Theater. He had a few other roles in film and television after 1944 when he was first discovered, but he had poor health, and he ended up dying 8 years after making this film at the age of 42. The new film's Gort was CGI, but it was impressive nonetheless, at least in most scenes. Both films are considered to be Christian allegories, and in the case of the remake, it is fairly blatant in a few scenes. But director Robert Wise, who helmed the original film in 1951, wasn't really aware of anything like that in his film. In fact, the fact that Klatu takes on the pseudonym Carpenter, which has been pointed out as Christ's profession as a youth, seems more coincidental than anything. It is true that the original Klatu was a messenger of peace, but as far as I know, Jesus Christ wasn't preparing an extraterrestrial armada to come and exterminate all life on Earth. One question neither film truly answers, though. When Klatu neutralizes all of the electrical energy on the planet at once, what happens to all the planes that were in the air at the time? I mean, he's not exactly depicted as all-powerful, so I doubt he would have been able to just, suspend them in midair? I'm pretty sure there was a fierce hailstorm of commercial aircraft slamming into the ground worldwide. Yay, Klatu! Way to be benevolent Earth-saver! Let's just pepper the whole planet with 9/11s. Ultimately, both films are not completely successful in telling their story. Look, I know the 51 film is considered to be a classic film in the genre for its day, but look at the vast majority of sci-fi films from the 50s. It didn't exactly have to work very hard to raise that bar, and in comparison to the visual effects in George Pal's film version of The War of the Worlds, produced a mere 2 years later, I'm sorry to say that this film pales in comparison. Similarly, despite the increased budget for the 2008 version, The New Day the Earth Stood Still has some pretty bad stinkers in the CGI, especially in the moments when Gort turns into a few trillion cyber bedbugs and starts just eating away at the eastern seaboard. Really kind of a letdown compared to the potential of having a giant solid Gort smashing shit up American Devlin style. Say what you will about those two assholes, but at least in Independence Day, when they fucked up a major city, they at least did it with some panache. For the first time ever, we're running a double rantometer. On my right, we'll show the ratings for the 1951 film, and on my left, the 2008 abortion. First off, in artistic, the 51 film gets a 3, while the new one gets a 4. I'm basing this more on the visual because the older film was shot on such a low budget, the effects they did have were pretty bad. Coolness? Well, the old film gets a 4, whereas the 2008 film only gets a 1. A big hit on the new film is the casting of Keanu Reeves, who went through most of the film looking like some kind of android somnambulist, and he wasn't even supposed to be a fucking android. Originality? Again, a 4 for the old film, and a 1 for the new version. The only real difference in the new film from the old one is that they made Klatu a bigger asshole. Kind of the opposite from what the film needed. Finally, on Suckitude, we have a 2 for the classic version, and a full-on 5 for the 2008 version. The classic gets a 2 again because it was an ambitious film and it certainly had its moments, but there were just too many filmmaking mistakes, such as allowing the wires and shit on the Gort costume to show, to let it go completely unscathed. That gives the 51 version a total score of 9, and the 2008 abortion gets a fucking 1. Seriously, Hollywood, stop remaking classics and stop fucking hiring Keanu Reeves. I don't even want to see him in the new Bill and Ted movie at this point. For God's sake, recast him with Affleck or something. Just, I don't know, stick him somewhere in a goddamn Disney Channel sitcom somewhere where he can't hurt anything. We have all of our requests in for December now, but that doesn't mean I've stopped taking them. Comment on the episode below or post ideas, film ideas for me to rant about on Twitter or Facebook using the hashtag FilmRantsEAT. You can also email me directly at filmrantseat@cox.net. As for Ello, well, that kind of ended badly, didn't it? Next week, as requested by Dennis Davison Jr., who also requested tonight's films, I'll be subjecting us all to the only kaiju aiga ever produced in Denmark, Reptilicus, starring virtually nobody whose name I can fucking pronounce, but at least there's no Keanu Reeves. Good night! Angry Men Reviews. Many fucks said, no fucks given.
Oh, son of a gun. You thought I was going to say son of a bitch, didn't you?
Fuck 'em, kill 'em, and eat 'em, boys. Go ahead.
Let's see. Klatu, Varada, Nike, Nickelback, Stevie Nicks. Nixon was a douchebag? Nike had battery? Nick Nolte? Nudge, nudge, grin, grin, wink, wink, say no more? I give it up.